Hey, and welcome back to the show. What really makes a coach stand out? Well, my guest, Francie Jain, has worked with countless coaches, and she knows the traits that set the best apart. From having a sparkle in your eye to creating original ideas, setting clear business boundaries, and building simple credibility, Francie shares the qualities that turns a good coach into an unforgettable one. Now let's dive in.
I really am interested in your company. You've got this B2B marketplace, and that sounds like, from an individual coach's standpoint, it sounds like, what is that? Like, why are we talking about that? But when you explained it to me, it is absolutely fascinating. So I want to hear more about this.
Great. Yeah, my pleasure. I'm so happy to talk about it. So Terawatt is like my other child. So I'm very, I could go on and on. But basically it started out with the idea of make it more accessible for people kind of in the middle or even just non-C-suite people to access coaching. That was how the original germ of the idea started. And then it kind of evolved and pivoted over the years. And so really what it's become is a B2B marketplace. And so it's very similar to Airbnb, but instead of helping you find like your perfect vacation destination, we help you find your perfect coach. And what's interesting about that is that most coaching companies that offer coaching, especially more accessible coaching, they don't want their coaches to be known, right? Because they don't want coaches to go around them. They want to make their coaches be kind of anonymous and set the prices. And we're really different. We want expert coaches who are known, and we link to their LinkedIn's and we link to their websites and their podcasts. And the idea is, what we're trying to do is make coaching more affordable for using a group setting. So we have one coach and maybe 20, 30 people on the other side receiving the wisdom from the coach. Affordability comes from dividing the coach's rate. And so the coaches really decide their rate on our platform. And that's also really important to us because really strong coaches who've had years and years of experience or insights or whatever have written, their own content, they have a market rate. And so we respect that. And so that's a really big part of what we're doing too. And so the other way to think about it is it's almost like a speakers bureau in that everyone has different rates and we try to be a matchmaker. What we're really doing right now in terms of the sales side is saying to organizations, especially in healthcare, if you work on building psychological safety in your organization, that will end up hitting the bottom line. You'll have higher retention, much lower employee turnover, and all that savings goes straight to the bottom line. And so it's a really cool win-win. And it's also the triple win is for the coach because they get to sort of, decide whether this works for them and they kind of can propose what they think should happen. Those coaches get picked on their expertise.
So let me see if I understand this. There's an organization and they decide that they would like to provide coaching for non-C-suite leaders, basically senior manager, director, manager sort of level people. And then they say, we've got 10 of these folks, and the individual coaches who belong to your platform, they will submit a proposal of, this is what I see could be done. This is my rate. Essentially, it's like they would do an RFP or an RFP response, right? And then that's where the match is. When the response matches what the organization thinks they need, then the conversation can continue. Is that sort of what it
Exactly.
is?
Yeah, a lot of it's customizable. So the RFP, that's how we kind of send out the information to the coach. Is I work with the buyer and we talk about the different things they're looking for. So like right now we're working with a library actually, and they were really interested in this concept of psychological safety because they've had a lot of turmoil at the library. And it's actually fascinating. It's really a lot of turmoil. It's like changes on the organization level. The employees started a union. They had there was a big fight with this new board member who was trying to like chop off jobs and eliminate the library, and then that person left. I mean, it was just this wild thing. Anyway, so they wanted to create more trust in the organization, and so we've been talking about that, and so we're working on a pilot with them. And so the idea is we're going to do a small thing with them to prove out the thesis, and then if they like that, after these few months, then we would do like an annual contract where we are doing stuff, many times a week. And so really what we try to do is like customize it for the individual's needs. And so everyone's going to be a little bit different. And that's what's also cool is like, everyone has a different perspective and they need different things. And by the way, they need different things each year. So like one coach might match with this organization this year, but then next year they might be looking for a different thing. And then that would be a different coach because everyone's a little bit different and they bring so much to the table. And so that's one of the things that gets me really excited is I always think it's kind of like a self-help book. Like if you buy one self-help book, you'll probably buy another, because you want to hear from different people. And I think it's the same with coaches. You want to have the different, and can some people say it in a way that really resonates. And, it's just kind of cool to experience different people's perspectives.
I love that. And so then the individual coach or the small coaching company does the proposal, they do the response, they see if there's a match. And then how is the deliverable handled? I'm assuming that within the original RFQ, there's deliverables, there's KPIs, there's a service level agreement, and then basically the coach is supposed to deliver to that agreement. Does the coach manage the entire relationship after that, or does your organization still?
Well, no, I really want to be a support for the coach. So the goal really is that I'm doing kind of any kind of heavy lifting or measurement or scheduling. And really, I really want to support the coach so that the coach thinks of Terawatt and of me as, like sort of like a little administrative help. So we're not just kind of like, oh, go for it. You're on your own now. It's much more like, how can we make it easier for the coach and how can we make it easier for the client? I want them to come and stay and keep staying forever. And so the more people stay and are happy, and then we can add people slowly, and I don't have to worry about like churning people out or finding the next person who's not very savvy. You know what I mean? I want to have savvy people on the website.
So super interesting. The role that I see you playing, facilitator, basically operational efficiency, and translator, right?
Yeah, and one of the things I haven't very much, but yes, 100%. And one of the things I really want to do a lot more of, which is measurement. So come in and say, listen, like let's create like control groups and target groups, and let's really measure what's happening so that you can have confidence that you want to do this again. And 100%. Another thing I would add is like I think what's funny about this is the people who control those numbers are typically the C-suite. So they don't want other people to know these numbers. But the thing is, that's also where I want to get involved, which is like, if you really care about this working and you want this pilot to work, then we need to like be more, in touch and like come together with all these metrics and numbers so that, like we can really test this out. It's not fair to send in coaching and then be like, and by the way, we're not going to tell you what the result was if that impacted anything. Like that's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so it has to go both ways because otherwise it's really easy for them to say, oh, there was no change. But like, was that true?
Yeah, you don't know. When the curtain's closed, you can't see the other side, right?
I think that that's really also what I'm trying to do too, which is say like, and that's why these sales often start with like the C-suite themselves less than HR, because I really want to say like, you need to all be on board with what we're doing because we need your numbers. It's not just like the HR is throwing out some spaghetti on the wall and trying to see what works. It's like this needs to be integrated into like what we're talking about with the organization.
I love that. That's so interesting. But you are not a coach. You've
Right.
got a business that works with coaches and does this back and forth with client organizations and clients specifically. So what it does is it gives you this really great insight into successful coaches. Like what is the difference between those coaches that you see that have really made a difference in an organization? They're just standout professionals. What do you see?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I really love to see and I really always admire is people who have like they've created their like our own original content, and that is in every sense of the word, right? They might have their own assessments, they might have training content, they might have or even just a presentation. But I really love it when they do that and they have very strong opinions about like what's popular. I love that. I just think it's so cool because I learn so much and because there's no right answer, right? So the more opinionated you are about what works, what doesn't work, what's baloney, it's just it's another way for someone to engage with you and see how deeply you think about this and how this is really like your wheelhouse. So I think the more that you can just become really opinionated about what's out there is great. Like this, we were just talking before we started filming, right, about this one coach of ours who was speaking, and she's so cool because her whole thing is like, EQ is so surface level, and I don't think there's enough change that's done with, and I love that. It's so cool because, especially when things are popular, I think it's really easy to feel like, well, I took the test, I scored a 90, like, good to go, and I just love hearing why someone doesn't like some things. It makes them a little bit more interesting to me. So that's one I think is so valuable because, and that will also help with client acquisition because you can really differentiate yourself from people who are just kind of like using tools that they're maybe mindlessly using tools without really having a differentiated view.
So content creators, but original content, not just rehashing the 10 steps to improve your relationship sort of thing, right? Like anybody can do that, especially with AI. I mean, I could go onto most AI platforms and say, hey, I'm a coach, give me 100 pieces of content, and it would gladly just spit it out, right? And so that is not helpful. And I think that we get a sense of that. So the more opinionated, either for or against,
Exactly.
or something that you really like, this is my stake in the ground. Now we've got some soul in it, right? We've got some soul in the content at the same time. So what else do you see with these really standout coaches?
What's funny is when you're saying that, I think the other thing that is, you make a great point, right? Because you can make ChatGPT have lots of flowery language. But guess what? Can you get people excited when you're telling them your ideas? Like you need to have a sparkle in your eye, twinkle in your eye.
Yeah.
It's the energy that you have when you're talking about it. And you could tell that that's like, that's such a human thing that like AI could never replace, right? It's like the passion that you have for what you're doing. And it's funny because I don't even realize it, but people say I'm like that a lot with this company because I think it is so fun. Like I believe in everything. And also like I built it around my values. So it's really easy for me to care about it. And so I would just say like, that's like the key is to feel it deeply so that you don't even have to speak really beautifully about it, but you have to really like have a strong urge to let people know like what you've learned. And I think that kind of that urge and that energy and the excitement, the twinkle in your eye, like I think that also really inspires me when I see people like that.
I love that. Yeah. And so this, you said about how you designed your company, but really for coaches, because most of us are really well in tune with our values, but really ground yourself in your values and then learn the stuff and then decide what is important to you and what you agree and don't agree with, right? Like for me, I'm a real, like, you should see my eyes rolling so far I'm looking at the back of my head. I am not a bro marketer. Like, you are never going to see me in that camp. It is not my style. It doesn't resonate with me. And of course, those are the people that are attracted to me. Anybody who goes, here we go, loud voice, like over the top, know it all. There's a no thank you for those people, right? So those people don't come in and listen to this show. They listen to something else. They listen to this instead of that. So what else do you see? I know that there's so much. I mean, you've already covered 3 points, but I want to hear more.
But here's a practical one. I thought was really smart when I first started hearing this. Now we do it, which is get paid in advance.
Yeah. Oh, that's a yeah.
Well, pretty much every coach has a story about not being paid. And it's usually their early clients when you're kind of like not as sophisticated. And I think that like that's just what I do now, which is like if you want this now, well, then you can pay for it now and then we will do it. But like it's just not if the person doesn't have the money now, I don't think they're gonna really have it in like a month. So I thought that was always so smart. And so that's something that I've adopted at Terawatt, which is get paid in advance until you like are comfortable that person is a reliable payer. And that's also, by the way, creates, I think, coaches not having been treated well by people paying their bills also creates like lingering anxiety in coaches when payment comes up. So I think if you can just be really firm about like your boundaries around payment, it
And
also
it's good business, right? Mm, you're not going to go buy a car and, well, I guess you will do it on a payment plan, but it's not it's not the same, right? So having good business practices also means that your brain is not distracted by your survival. So if you're coaching somebody and in the back of your head you're thinking, gosh, I wonder if Jane is going to make that payment today. It really detracts from your focus and for your being present with the clients. It also means that you don't have the cash flow to take that extra training that you think, with this organization, I can really see that I did level 2 of this training. It is really going to, knock their socks off, right? So it really puts you in a good position to being able to be proactive instead of reactive, and instead of worrying, to be present with your clients. And that's so much of what coaches do.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, yeah, 100, I mean, I think, yes, 100% all that. I think another thing that's really valuable is developing relationships with like-minded coaches. So with people who you feel like are your, people, and that you can have a little bit of a camaraderie, or maybe even, like once a month check-in or a dinner or a drink or whatever, because there's I think being a coach oftentimes is being a solopreneur, and you're kind of your own little person on a little island. And connecting with people always makes something better, in my opinion. But it also is just a great way to feel like connected to people, and less kind of client and coach. You know what I mean? Starting and just developing other relationships too. So you're finding, and then by the way, those relationships lead to referrals. So if someone's busy, they might pass on, or they're looking for something totally different, but you're that person. And I think that like so much can be gained, I think, from having those kinds of relationships where you grow up together.
And, I found that this is easier for newer coaches. Many of them have just come out of training and they've still got that peer group that they did training with. And oftentimes there's a good support network. Where I see the challenged is, after 5 years, you've got to really be conscious of trying to maintain a peer network. It's
Yeah.
not going to be the same people because 5 years, life changes. We all evolve at a different pace. But to keep this sort of a community around you is really, really key. Your friends and family, they love you, but they don't know what it's like to
You're right.
have your kind of business. So they can't support you. They can support you to a point, but they can't completely support you because they don't totally understand. Like, I'm in the digital world. I don't do anything in person. So if I was to go to my husband and say, "Oh, my email open rates are just down 5%," he's like, huh? Right? Like it makes no sense to him. But another coach who is also doing email marketing will say, "Oh, really? Oh, what do you think's going on there? Like we can actually see the parallel. We understand that language." That's the thing.
Mm.
The other thing, you alluded to it because it's this, as a solopreneur, you're often feeling quite isolated in your day to day, is that it's really hard to say, listen, I'm having a hard time. Because who are you going to tell it to? You're not going to tell it to your clients. You need, like maybe there's something going on with your life. They're your clients. They're not your peers. So to have somebody that is a peer that you are in community with, that they'll understand. It's like, oh, no kidding. You just got the flu, or like whatever. There could be a million things going on in life, right?
Yeah, and there's this great analogy. I have to find the woman's name, but there was this coach at one point who had this analogy of a hitting partner, and she talked about how she, growing up, she played tennis, and she would have this one friend, and they would be hitting partners, and she was saying, initially it seemed weird because we were like competitors, but so like our competition with each other really raised our games, and so we stayed connected even though there was still kind of a little bit of a competition, but it helped us both grow and have like a safe sort of support system. Is really interesting. And it makes me think a lot about professional tennis now. How can you be friends if you're like, both top 10 in the world, and you like kind of want to beat each other, but there's kind of like on the court and off the court, and I think off the court, like you said, like only those people can really understand exactly what's happening. But I also think you can learn so much. Like someone may have developed some really smart habit that could be really helpful, and vice versa. And so I think that there's just a lot of help with, like a good friend like that, or a pacing partner, or a hitting partner could help with you. Um, and so that's one of the things I just think that people should always think about. Is it's so easy to forget that like human contact is like the secret sauce, and especially that's your job, right? I mean, I'm sure these coaches, but I think sometimes you can be kind of in the sales mode, right? And
So interesting. Now, I've never heard of that concept of a hitting partner or a pacing partner, but isn't like this idea of being competitors and being collaborators, and both of you raising the bar because of that relationship.
Yeah, I love that. Right? Isn't it so beautiful? And I think about it a lot because even when you see these, let's say you'll see like, I don't know, like Coco Gauff played Naomi Osaka, right? And like I just watched that this summer. And I think they're kind of friendly off court. I mean, they're different ages, so maybe they're not super friendly, but they're friendly enough. But when you're on the court, everyone's trying to beat the other one. I mean, that's like given. But then you can be off the court and really like connect really well, and just everyone agrees like on the court it's going to be different from off the court. But with a coach, I mean, life isn't that binary, so it's not like you're going head to head against with clients or anything like that. Everything's going to be so different. So it's just going to be even better, right? Because you don't even have that animosity with that kind of person. It would.
Any other thoughts that you have about this?
Oh,
Not top 10, but like these differentiating qualities. Yeah.
okay. One other idea is I really like. I think when people start to be in the business for a little while and they start to think about how am I going to scale this? That's when they start to come up with really inventive ways. I call it like almost like non-live content, right? So it could be like a pre-recorded series, a training series, or it could be a book, or it could be a podcast, or any way that in some ways it could be a lead generator, but it's also a way to get your content out there. And I think that that's a really great way to do like many things at once. And so I would recommend that people do that. I think that like even now when we're pitching to clients, now we're throwing in, and by the way, you can do the virtual the recorded virtual thing, which will save you time and money. And that's something that can be part of, coaches' sales options. And I think it's a great way to have like your most basic stuff out there. And then kind of work on the hardest part. But there's also a price to that. And the thing that's interesting about software is that could cost $1 or it could cost $1 million. I mean, software, it's hard to price. So what's cool about it is you can really decide how you want to monetize it, but it just gives you so many more options than just only the one-on-one stuff.
Right. And that's really important. That's for coaches who are a little bit farther along. They've got some experience under their belt. They're working with some clients, and what they're finding oftentimes is that they are repeating the same concept, or they're teaching the same concept and then coaching after that on the person's experience. But if you could give the client some time freedom where they could listen to that 10-minute recording before coming to the session, it just makes things so much easier. And for the coach, it's kind of nice to not like, okay, I'm just going to repeat the lesson about X again for the 100th time, right? So it's
Right.
really great, efficient use of your time. But what you're talking about is it's really all kinds of things. Like you said, it's podcasts, or it's digital courses, or it's books, or free training, pre-recorded free training. And I do find all of those things very valuable, and they have multiple uses, right? So some of them might be a lead magnet. Some of them might be a bit of a time leverage. Some of them might be just a way to have some kind of, they call it passive income. I mean, to me,
Right.
there's no real true passive income, but it could be passive income, right? Oh, for the coaches that are listening, think about that. Like, what do you teach over and over and over to your clients? Is there a possibility for you there? And it doesn't have to be complicated. It could be 5-10-minute videos that really go through some basic concepts that are integral to what you do. So, thought.
Right, and not to mention, when you do something like that, then you can do all this repurposing.
Mm-hmm.
When you have video, it could be crazy, right? You could like do some like little clips onto LinkedIn. You could do little clips onto TikTok, onto Instagram, depending on how creative and involved you want to be. But I
Mhm.
think that that's always something I'm thinking about too. I'm terrible on social media, and I've like ceded that to other people. But I just think other people, might be really good at it. And so like that could be a great way to like come up with other content. I mean, a lot of people find the social media is a huge lead generator for them. And so, if you're looking at, I always think of one-to-one coaching as a little bit more of like a retail sale, right? So social media could be a nice avenue for some people. And so anyway, I guess my point just being that like, don't just remember that anything you create has so many uses. And then the other thing to remember is this, and this is like an SEO thing. This is kind of what you're talking about, living your life digitally. So SEO stands for like search engine optimization, right? But the more content you create that's online, the more you have an online reputation, the easier it is for people to find you. Slash, the easier it is for people to find you who aren't looking for you,
Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
so I think that like if you now in this era, it's worth it to put everything online because it just makes it more, there's like more stuff to increase your online reputation.
Yeah, it's a bigger digital footprint essentially. Yeah. And so the term that I use is repurposing. And so a prime example, and this isn't new and it's not overly fancy, is this podcast. The audio version is my prime version. We also have it on YouTube. And then Mariana, the woman who supports me, she takes it and she makes it into reels. And then the reels are posted on YouTube and Pinterest and all the social media platforms. And then from that, there's little text clips that we create and we post those as well. And each of those is another piece of content. There is a blog post and a LinkedIn newsletter and all of those things from one conversation or
Yeah.
one small episode. And so the thing to do when you hear this and you go, oh my gosh, I could be doing all of that with one video. For me, I'm always encouraging people to get really simple. I call it the one method. Choose your one platform and your one prime piece of content, and then reuse that, but only in a way that seems doable to you. Like you don't need to do everything. You just need to do some of this stuff well. Do that first piece of content and then repurpose it in 3 different ways, and that's good. Just don't do any more, right? And then if you have some help, they can go and they can slice and dice it and do all kinds of amazing things. And when they do that slicing and dicing, they could do that 6 months from now. And there's your content for the next 6 months while you're traveling and doing something fun.
Yes, exactly. And I think, what's funny is I haven't yet figured out how to like offload the social media in like a affordable way. But that's like to me like the big frontier because to do your own social media really could take your whole day. It
Oh,
could
yeah.
take days a week, all day long, because it's just you're always learning how to do these things and learning how to like even like splice the video. It's like, and I'm sure there are experts out there who can do it in 5 minutes.
Definitely.
With AI, there'll probably be some tools, I'm sure, coming out with the same kind of thing. But anyway, so yeah, I think I would just, the more that you can, I guess, just try to like make your things work in several different ways, just the more efficient you can be.
Yeah. And don't
Yeah.
spend too much time thinking about the social media side. Like
Yeah.
if you're a coach, your prime role is to sign clients and coach them. And so the social media is not your job. Your business is sign clients and do great work with those clients. That's it. And
Yes.
then what time you have left, you do other things. Mhm.
It's best to like love the people you have and do the best with the people you have than the next person because you never know how that can ripple. And so the more that you can just find a process where you can really help people like deeply and help them evolve or achieve their goals in whatever way, then the more that the referral process kicks in because, there's always someone, asking someone casually about a coach or do you know anyone? And it's very hard for the average person to find a coach. So if they wake up one morning and they're like, I'd like to get a coach, like it's very hard to figure out where you would start. So the referral is really valuable.
Yeah. And they might not wake up thinking, oh, I should get a coach. They wake up thinking, I have a problem.
Mhm.
This
True.
problem is driving me crazy. I need help. Well, many people have no idea that the coach might be the perfect match for them with that.
Yeah.
And so when they're focused on, I need a solution to X or I need some support in getting Y goal, that is when they start to look around. And that's when they often find a coach. And they might say to their friend, hey, I'm having problem X. That friend might just be the referral that you need.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say, so as we get ready to wrap up, is there any last piece, like one thing that you just haven't said yet that you think is so important for coaches to know about being that standout coach.
Well, here's one that I think is sort of obvious, but it may not be obvious for other people. I think it's really important to have your own website where you have an email address that attaches to that website that's not Gmail, and have a presence on LinkedIn. Like that to me is like the basics. The website doesn't have to be elaborate or anything. It can be a landing page, but there's something about 20th century, even like 21st century, 20th century people are like, they go to online to see if you have a website. I don't know what it is. It's a thing. And when you have a landing page website, people are like, oh, due diligence, check. That's a real person. I mean, it's very bizarre. And even I do that. And it's funny because not all of our coaches have websites. We ask them to. And listen, if you have such a booming business that you are getting referrals left, right, and center that you don't want anymore, great. That might be a good choice for you. But if that's not you, it's the perfect place because it's the one place you can tell things exactly the way you want and order it the exact way you want. And you have 100% control. Like you have a little bit of control over LinkedIn, but it's not the same thing. And it doesn't have to be elaborate, but it's so cool because when you go to different websites, you really do get a sense of people's personality and what's important to them and what they're trying to convey. And I think it's a missed opportunity when people don't. And so what I would just say is like, just find a very inexpensive way to get across what you want people to know about you on the website. And I think it really elevates the coach as a professional.
I agree. And so those of you who are listening, you have probably listened to a bunch of my episodes. And while I completely agree with Francie, I agree with her from what I would call a phase 2 coach. So a phase 1 coach is somebody who has not worked with any clients, just getting started. For those folks, I recommend build your LinkedIn profile. Let your LinkedIn be your one place for now. But once you've worked with a handful of clients, now you're in that place to go and create a simple website. Otherwise, and this is because I made this mistake when I was starting. I invested money, a lot of time, and a lot of energy building a website. Then I started working with clients. And guess what? The website was completely obsolete because this is what I thought I was going to do with clients. But then when I was actually working with clients, it was a different story. So then I had to redo it. So phase 2 coach, yes. Phase 1 coach, start with LinkedIn.
I agree. And as I was saying that, I'm thinking to myself, how many times have I changed my website? But what I would say is this is why you want to have it be like Wix or a really like low cost one that you can change the words because at least every few months, I'm changing like the homepage of my website. Like, things are evolving all the time, the things I'm saying, the way I'm talking. And I think that like you always want to give yourself that ability to change the words and not have paid someone, let's say $30,000 to make a beautiful website for you that you can never touch because it's all in like crazy code. Have it be in like some sort of WordPress or something where you can really like, maybe add a blog post or a thing and you change the headlines. Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think like another thing I would say, it kind of depends on the coach's focus, I guess. But one of my college roommates is a coach and she does a lot of stuff in executive presence and it's super cool. And it's a little bit like the old school, like your colors, like what are your good colors? Yeah. But it like blends really beautifully into like vulnerability and how to get people like to hear what you're saying, but like kind of by like addressing your appearance. It's really cool. And so on her website, she has all these like before and afters and it's like, because the point is there's this really weird dynamic where like when someone's wearing like a crazy floral dress, you can't really see their face because you're looking at the dress. But if they're wearing something more simple and like colors that sort of like accentuate their positives, you can really see their face and like you want to hear what they have to say. And so that's kind of the point. And I think, case studies or examples of how you've helped people, like that is like catnip for people, because they see themselves in that and they want that kind of transformation. So the more that you can kind of get them excited about like who you helped, how you helped them, then what happened, like that is so exciting to people.
Oh, 100%. Gosh, I've enjoyed this conversation. Really appreciate you taking the time out to speak with me. And I know that the listeners are going to love this too. So as we wrap up, how can people find out more about you and your company?
Yeah, so Terawatt is just terawatt.co. And I'm on LinkedIn, Francie Jain, and Terawatt's on LinkedIn too. And feel free to reach out to me, especially if you're a coach. We're always looking for really talented coaches. And one of the big things I always say to people in the coaching biz is that I'm not really interested in certifications. If you have certifications, great. That's not bad. But what I really want is like talented people. So what that means to me is, I don't care if you graduated from high school or you have a PhD. Like, I want you to be interesting and exciting and have great examples of helping people and be very sparkly eyed, about your business, because that's what will resonate with clients. And so, I guess my point being that like the thing that's cool to me about Terawatt is we have this whole page of find a coach, and it's like 80 coaches. It's all these little faces, you can just scroll, scroll, scroll. And you would, everyone's different and they bring different things. And like, it's just so cool to have, I call it like all the stars in the sky. And that's always what we're looking for. And I think we're a good use for coaches who feel like really confident about what they're working on and feel like they need a bigger audience. They'd like more people to know what they're talking about. And like, that's kind of how I say it.
That's a great invitation. So if that sounds like you, go check out Francie's company, and maybe this is the right kind of a match for you. Okay, everyone. So thanks so much for tuning in to this episode, and I really appreciate you. And just know that I love to have these kinds of conversations. And while I'm talking to Francie and any of the other guests, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what would you like to ask? What are you interested in? And so I try to ask the questions that you might ask. And so I'd love to hear from you if there's a special guest you would love to have me interview, or if you have a question that hasn't been asked before. Really appreciate you tuning in, and I wish you all the best and have a lovely week.